8 months pregnant, standing on a frozen mountain road, with fog swallowing the trees. I watched my father drive away with my mother and sister in the back seat. My handbag was in a muddy ditch. My phone was gone, my wallet was gone, my coat was too thin for the cold. Dad. And my father had just told me to walk 15 miles back to town if I wanted to keep being stubborn. He thought that was the moment he finally broke me. He thought an 8-month pregnant widow, alone in the Cascade Mountains, would panic, beg, and sign away the $3 million my husband had left for our unborn daughter. What he did not know was that I had been recording him for 6 months. What he did not know was that the insurance money was never my only protection. And what he never imagined was that while he was abandoning me on a mountain road, federal agents were already moving toward his offices, his bank accounts, his shell companies, and the mansion he still believed belonged to him. My name is Leah Whitmore. I am 34 years old. I am a forensic accountant. And the night my family left me to freeze in the mountains, they finally gave me the last piece of evidence I needed. My husband, Daniel, used to say that numbers were my second language. He said I heard money the way musicians heard notes. A missing receipt, a duplicated vendor, a strange management fee, a trust account. With too much movement and too little explanation, those were the off-key sounds most people missed. Daniel was a firefighter. He understood danger differently than I did. He ran towards smoke. I ran towards spreadsheets. He used to tease me that both jobs were about entering burning buildings. Only mine had cleaner shoes and more lawyers. When he died in a warehouse fire 2 years after our wedding, people told me he was a hero. They were right. But the word hero did not warm the empty side of the bed. It did not answer when I reached for him in the night. It did not teach me how to fold tiny baby clothes with shaking hands because he had died 6 weeks after we learned I was pregnant. Daniel left behind a life insurance policy, $3 million. He had bought it after we got married because he said loving someone meant planning for days you prayed would never come. I hated that money at first. It felt like a number standing where my husband should have been. But when I placed my hands on my growing stomach and felt our daughter move, I understood what Daniel had done. He had not left me wealth. He had left us protection. And protection was the one thing my family had never truly given me. My father, Victor Whitmore, built Whitmore Pinnacle Holdings, from a handful of rental cabins into a real estate empire that looked impressive from the outside. Luxury mountain homes, commercial developments, investor dinners, a polished public brand called Cascade Summit Properties. People in Seattle spoke his name with respect. People in Bend called him visionary. People in the family called him impossible to challenge. My mother, Celeste, was the velvet glove around his fist. She remembered everyone's birthdays, sent tasteful flowers, and could destroy your confidence with one sentence spoken softly over tea. My older sister, Betrayal, was their chosen heir, Beautiful, loud, expensive, confident in every room except the ones where competence was required. Brielle had the title of Chief Operating Officer, though everyone in the company knew her real skill was arriving late with perfect hair and leaving before the hard questions started. Her husband, Mason, held the title of CFO. He was not a criminal mastermind. He was worse in a quieter way. He was useful. He signed whatever Victor placed in front of him, smiled for lenders, and believed that being protected by a rich family was the same as being loved. Then there was me, the daughter who left, the accountant, the one my father called too technical, the one my mother said made people uncomfortable because I asked questions that sounded like accusations. They were not accusations. Not at first. They were warnings. I first suspected something was wrong at a family foundation luncheon. I was 7 months pregnant then, tired in a way that felt cellular, wearing a navy dress that no longer fit right, and shoes Daniel would have told me not to wear. My father was presenting a new mountain development to a room full of investors and donors. He spoke about sustainability, community, and generational value. He always loved words that sounded moral when attached to money. On the screen behind him, I noticed a line in the projected financial summary. A property valuation I had seen before. Only this time it was higher, not slightly higher, absurdly higher. A parcel appraised for $8.4 million 3 months earlier was listed as $17.9 million in investor materials. My hand moved to my stomach. The baby kicked. I kept my face still. After the luncheon, I asked Mason whether the valuation had been updated. He froze for half a second. That was enough. People think fraud announces itself through panic. Most of the time, it appears in a pause. Mason said, Victor handles the investor packages. I asked, but you signed the lender certification? His face tightened. Leah, this isn't one of your federal cases. He was wrong, he just did not know it yet. For most of my career, I worked with federal prosecutors tracing corporate fraud. Ponzi structures, asset concealment, inflated collateral, fake management fees, trust designed to look clean while carrying dirty money through polished pipes. My job was to make the paper confess. Yep. I knew what fraud looked like when it dressed itself as ambition. So after that luncheon, I did something I had avoided for years. I looked at my father's company the way I looked at defendants. Not as family, as evidence. The first shell company was easy to find. Cedarline Ventures, LLC. Then came Ashfall Management, North Harbor Equity, Silver Ridge Holdings, and Hearthstone Capital Partners. Different names, same addresses, related bank accounts, payments looping through them like water through hidden pipes. New investor money arrived through commercial real estate offerings, Old investors were paid preferred returns from those incoming funds. A percentage of each closing moved into family trusts, personal accounts, luxury purchases, and renovation budgets that had nothing to do with the properties being sold. A 5-year real estate Ponzi scheme. Roughly $50 million. My father had not built an empire. He had built a house of cards with marble floors. I should tell you what it feels like to discover your family is criminal. It is not like the movies. There is no clean shock, no single dramatic gasp. It is more like waking up inside a room where every familiar object has shifted 1 inch to the left. Your childhood photographs become evidence of proximity. Your holiday dinners become networking events. Your mother's jewelry becomes a ledger entry. Your sister's vacations become investor losses in designer sunglasses. At first, I tried to believe my father had made bad decisions under pressure. Then I found the spreadsheets. Not one, many. Versioned files, hidden tabs, projected inflows, required new investor targets, payout schedules for old investors, personal extraction percentages. 20% from certain transactions diverted into private trust accounts. 20%, not a mistake, a system. I sat in my home office with Daniel's photograph on the shelf and my daughter turning under my ribs while I read the numbers. I thought of every firefighter widow I had met after Daniel died, every teacher who invested retirement savings, every small business owner who believed my father's glossy brochures. Then I threw up in the trash can beside my desk. Not from pregnancy, from recognition. I contacted Agent Rowan Mercer 3 days later. Rowan worked with a federal financial crimes task force. We had crossed paths on cases before. He was patient, skeptical, and allergic to drama. That made him perfect. When I called, he said, "Leah, tell me this is not about your father." I said, "I wish I could." We met in a quiet room above a public library in Tacoma. I brought copies, never originals. Bank summaries, entity charts, valuation mismatches, internal emails, screenshots of hidden tabs. Rowan went through them without speaking. His silence did not frighten me. Professional silence is different from family silence. Family silence asks you to disappear. Professional silence reads the page. Finally, he sat back. How much? Conservative estimate, 47 million, likely over 50. He rubbed his forehead. And your role? None. I never worked for the company. I never signed anything. I'm giving you what I found. Rowan looked at me for a long time. You understand what cooperating means? I placed one hand on my stomach. Yes, he said. They are your family. I looked down at Daniel's wedding ring on my necklace. No, I said. They are my relatives. There is a difference. The investigation was called Operation Glass House. For 6 months, I lived 2 lives. In one, I was the grieving pregnant daughter visiting family dinners, accepting my mother's criticism, listening to Brielle complain about resort linens, and letting my father talk down to me about business I understood better than anyone at his table. In the other, I wore a recording device under loose maternity sweaters and documented a criminal enterprise from the inside. I recorded conversations, copied physical ledgers, photographed checks, mapped transfers, tracked trust assets. I let my father underestimate me because underestimation is a door criminals leave unlocked. The hardest part was my mother. Victor threatened, Brielle bragged, Mason panicked. But Celeste studied my face. She knew how to find bruises no one else could see and press them with perfect nails. Daniel would have wanted you to stay close to family, she said one evening while pouring tea. I nearly dropped the cup. Daniel would have hated what they were doing. But my mother had always been skilled at using love as a weapon after removing its handle. She leaned closer. You cannot raise a baby alone on grief and courtroom work. I smiled, I said, I know. The recorder caught every word. By late fall, my father's empire was collapsing faster than he could hide it. A commercial lender demanded $5 million after discovering irregular collateral valuations. A group of investors wanted audited statements. A tax lien surfaced on one of the family's mountain properties. Brielle's luxury spending continued as if denial were a business plan. At one dinner, Victor slammed his fist on the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. We need bridge liquidity, he said. That was a phrase people used when they did not want to say they needed money immediately or everything would burn. Brielle said, What about Leah's insurance? The room went still. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. My mother did not look shocked. That was how I knew it had already been discussed. Victor looked at me. His face softened in a way that frightened me more than anger. Leah, he said, your husband would want that money to protect this family. I felt our daughter move. I said, Daniel left that money for his child. Brielle rolled her eyes. She is not even born yet. For a moment, I could not speak. Then I said, and already she has more claim to Daniel's love than any of you. After that dinner, things moved quickly. My mother called every day, sometimes crying, sometimes pleading, sometimes reminding me of childhood sacrifices I did not remember asking them to make. Brielle sent messages about loyalty. Mason sent one apology that read like someone had typed it with fear sitting on his shoulders. Victor stopped pretending. He came to my house without calling. I saw him through the door camera, standing on my porch in a charcoal coat, looking less like a father than a lender collecting a debt. I did not open the door. He spoke through it anyway. 3 million keeps this family alive for 30 days. I said through the intercom. Then the family is already dead. His eyes changed. That was the first time I saw what he looked like without charm. Do not forget who gave you everything, he said. I looked around my small house, Daniel's boots by the back door because I still could not move them, baby blankets folded on the couch, stacks of case files I had earned with my own labor. You didn't give me this, I said. He leaned closer to the camera. You will sign. Then he left. I sent the footage to Agent Mercer. The mountain trip was my mother's idea. At least that was how she presented it. A family weekend, she said, before the baby comes. I knew it was a trap. So did Agent Mercer. But federal cases do not move on suspicion alone. We needed clear coercion. We needed the request. We needed the threat. I agreed to go. People often ask how I could risk it while pregnant. The truth is, I had been risking something every day by staying silent near them. This time, at least, the risk had a plan. I wore a recorder stitched into the lining of my maternity sweater. I carried a decoy phone in my handbag. And inside the sole of my orthopedic boot, hidden beneath a custom insert, I carried a satellite phone no one in my family knew existed. Daniel had once joked that I planned for emergencies like a woman who did not trust the universe. He was right. I did not trust the universe. I trusted preparation. The drive into the Cascades was quiet at first. Fog thickened between the pines. The road narrowed. The temperature dropped. My mother sat beside my father. Brielle sat in the back with me, scrolling through photos of a handbag she could no longer afford. Then Victor turned off the main road. He stopped at a turnout above a ravine. No houses, no traffic, only fog, black trees, and the sound of water somewhere below. Victor took a folder from the center console. My stomach tightened. Inside were transfer documents for Daniel's life insurance proceeds. Not a request, not a loan agreement, a transfer. My father handed me a pen. Sign. I looked at the paper. The recorder warmed under my sweater like a second heartbeat. No. Brielle sighed. Leah, stop being dramatic. You act like Daniel is going to crawl out of the grave and check the account. My vision went white at the edges. My mother said, "Do not make your dead husband an excuse for selfishness." That hurt more than the cold ever could. I placed both hands on my stomach. My husband died saving people, I said. He did not die to fund your crimes. Victor's face hardened. There he was, the real man. If you do not sign, he said, you walk. My mother looked out the windshield. Brielle smiled. I looked at my father and understood, fully, that blood is not the opposite of cruelty. Sometimes blood is the road cruelty uses to get closest. I still did not sign. Victor got out of the car, opened my door, and told me to step out. My body was heavy, slow, aching from pregnancy. But I stepped onto the gravel. Brielle reached across the seat and grabbed my handbag. What are you doing? I asked. She opened the door just enough to throw it toward the ditch. It landed in mud and slid down the slope. There, she said. Now you can have a little hike and think about family. My mother did not stop her. That silence cut through me. A mother watching her pregnant daughter stand in freezing fog and choosing comfort over conscience. Victor said, 15 miles to town. Maybe by the time you get there, you'll understand gratitude. He closed the door. The SUV pulled away. Red taillights blurred in the fog, then disappeared. For a few seconds, I stood completely still. The mountain was silent. My daughter moved inside me. I whispered, "It's okay, Grace." That was the first time I said her name out loud. Then I sat on a wet log, removed my boot, pulled the satellite phone from the sole, and called Agent Mercer. When he answered, I said, "They did it." Rowan said, "Are you safe?" I looked at the fog where my family had vanished. For the first time, I said, I think I am. The arrests began 23 minutes later. Federal agents entered Whitmore Pinnacle's Seattle headquarters, while Victor's executive assistant was still trying to reschedule a lender call. They seized computers, servers, phones, filing cabinets, and the framed photos of mountain developments that had never been worth what investors were told. At the same time, another team froze bank accounts tied to Cedarline Ventures, North Harbor Equity, Silver Ridge Holdings, Ashfall Management, and every trust Victor believed was safely beyond reach. Mason was arrested at a private club with a whiskey glass in his hand. He cried before they finished reading the warrant. Brielle was stopped at the mountain house. My mother was with her. Victor arrived 20 minutes later, furious that his gate code had been disabled. He was still shouting about trespassing when agents placed him in handcuffs. I know these details because Rowan told me later, after a rescue team brought me down from the mountain and a doctor confirmed that Grace and I were both safe. I remember lying in a hospital bed with warm blankets over my legs, listening to my daughter's heartbeat on the monitor. Fast, strong, alive. That sound did what no courtroom ever could. It reminded me what the fight was for. Victor believed his assets were protected by an irrevocable trust. He had bragged about it for years. Smart families protect what they build, he liked to say. What he built was fraud. And fraud does not become clean because a lawyer wraps it in expensive language. The trust was funded with money diverted from investors. That made it vulnerable as fraudulent conveyance. The shell companies were not protective walls. They were corridors connecting the crimes. I helped federal analysts build the map. Every account, every transfer, every false valuation, every consulting fee that ended at a family credit card. It was strange, sitting in a federal conference room with my swollen ankles propped on a chair, explaining how my father hid stolen money. Strange, but not sad in the way people expected. The sadness had come earlier, at the table, on the porch, in the car, on the mountain road. By the time the government began seizing assets, I was not grieving the loss of my family anymore. I was grieving the years I had mistaken proximity for love. Mason cooperated first, of course he did. Useful men become cooperative when protection disappears. He turned over physical ledgers Victor had ordered him to keep off the system. Those ledgers made the case impossible to deny. The most satisfying justice did not happen in court. It happened at the mountain mansion. Victor loved that house more than he loved most people. $4 million of glass, stone, imported wood, heated floors, and views he described as ownership of the horizon. Years earlier, he had separated it from certain business assets to keep it safe if anything ever happened. But Victor's genius had one weakness. He was arrogant about boring things. Property taxes. For 3 years, while cash tightened and investor payouts became harder to fake, he ignored the taxes on that mansion. The county eventually seized and auctioned it. Quietly, legally, efficiently. And I bought it. Not in my own name. Through a Delaware LLC that no one in my family connected to me. I used Daniel's insurance money. Not to save my father, not to feed the fraud. To take back a place built on stolen safety and turn it into something my daughter could one day understand. The day Victor returned to the mansion after abandoning me, he walked into a house that legally belonged to me. He did not know. He poured himself a drink in my kitchen. He shouted at agents from my foyer. He demanded rights he no longer had from my front steps. There are moments when justice has a sense of architecture. The federal trial took place in Seattle. Grace was 4 months old by then. I wore a black suit that finally fit my body again and carried Daniel's ring on a chain under my blouse. Victor did not look at me when I entered the courtroom. My mother did. She looked smaller, not sorry, just smaller. Brielle looked furious, as if consequences were a personal betrayal. The prosecutors played recordings. Victor demanding the insurance transfer, Celeste insulting Daniel's memory, Brielle joking about my dead husband, the sound of the SUV door closing, the engine leaving, the mountain wind. The courtroom listened to my family abandon me. For years, I had been taught not to make private pain public. But private pain is where abusers build their kingdoms. So I testified. I explained the shell companies, the false valuations, the investor payouts, the trust transfers, the insurance extortion. Defense attorneys tried to make me sound bitter. I let them try. Then I answered with documents. Bitterness is a feeling, evidence is a structure. They could attack my feelings. They could not move the structure. The sentences came down on a rainy Thursday. Victor Whitmore received 15 years in federal prison for leading the fraud, extortion, and reckless endangerment. Celeste received 10 years for money laundering, conspiracy, and active participation in the coercion. Brielle received 7 years after the judge added time for perjury and assaulting a federal officer during the seizure. Mason received 5 years of probation because he cooperated early and turned over physical ledgers. When the judge read my father's sentence, Victor finally looked at me. His eyes were full of hatred. For the first time in my life, his hatred did not frighten me. It clarified him. My mother cried. Brielle cursed under her breath. Mason stared at the table like a man who had mistaken cowardice for loyalty and was only now receiving the invoice. After sentencing, a reporter outside the courthouse asked whether I felt I had destroyed my family. I looked at Grace asleep against my chest. Then I said, "No, I stopped them from destroying more families." That clip went everywhere. For a week, strangers wrote to me, some with praise, some with anger, many with stories about parents, siblings, spouses, and business partners who used love as collateral. That was when I realized the mansion could not remain a symbol of what Victor stole. It had to become a place where other people learned how to get free. The mansion is now called Cascade Healing Retreat. The first time I walked through it after the trial, the room still smelled faintly of my mother's candles and my father's cigars. I opened every window. Cold mountain air moved through the house like a cleansing argument. We removed the crystal bar and built a counseling room. We turned Brielle's suite into temporary housing for women leaving financially abusive families. Victor's office became a classroom. On the wall where he once hung a framed map of his developments, we placed a whiteboard for financial literacy workshops. Budgeting, credit repair, fraudulent debt, coerced signatures, how to read a trust, how to freeze credit, how to document threats, how to leave safely. The first group session had 6 women. One of them cried when she saw the locked document cabinet because she said she had never had a safe place for paperwork before. I understood that abuse is not always a bruise. Sometimes it is a missing bank password, a loan in your name, a parent who says, "Sign this if you love us," a spouse who calls debt family business, a sister who throws your handbag into a ditch. People think freedom begins when you leave. Sometimes it begins when you finally understand the papers in front of you. Grace is 3 now. She has Daniel's smile and my habit of watching before speaking. Sometimes she runs through the retreat garden chasing leaves while women sit on the patio and learn how to rebuild credit scores. Sometimes I look at her and think about the mountain road, the fog, the cold, the red taillights, the way I said her name for the first time when no one else was there to protect us. I used to wonder whether cutting off my parents made me cruel. Then Grace learned the word safe. She says it when she crawls into my lap. She says it when thunder shakes the windows. She says it when I lock the door at night. That word answered the question for me. Family is not blood-demanding sacrifice. Family is protection. Family is the person who turns the car around, the person who opens the door, the person who keeps your documents safe until you are ready to use them. My father abandoned me because I would not trade my daughter's future for his crimes. My mother watched because comfort mattered more to her than conscience. My sister laughed because she believed cruelty was power. They were wrong. Power was the recorder under my sweater, the satellite phone in my boot, the ledgers and federal evidence boxes, the insurance money Daniel left for our child, the mansion turned into a refuge. Power was surviving the road they left me on and using it to lead others home. Sometimes visitors ask whether I forgive them. I tell them forgiveness is not the part of the story I am interested in. I am interested in repair. Repair is honest. Forgiveness is often demanded by people who do not want to repair anything. I repaired what I could. I repaired the stolen records by handing them to the government. I repaired Daniel's gift by protecting it from people who saw his love as liquidity. I repaired the mansion by filling it with people my father would have ignored. I repaired my idea of family by refusing to teach Grace that blood gives anyone permission to harm her. The rest belongs to the prison system, the courts, and whatever conscience my parents and sister may or may not have left. As for me, I live Not perfectly, not without nightmares, not without days when the smell of mountain fog makes my hands shake. But I live in a house that no longer belongs to fraud. I raise a daughter who will know the difference between love and control. I teach women that numbers can be weapons, shields, maps, and keys. And every autumn, when the fog rolls through the cascade trees, I stand on the porch of the retreat and remember the night my father thought he left me with nothing. He was wrong. He left me with the truth. And the truth was enough to bring his whole house of cards down.